Welcome to Points in the Podcast. I just had an espresso, so I'm ready to go. I am ready to talk basketball, even though there's not a ton going on. But once down a quick like double shot of espresso, your brain starts going like there's more than you think. There's plenty of stuff going on. So I'm excited. We have some things here to talk about. Matt, how are you doing before we
See,
begin?
I'm kind of the opposite of you right now. I just got back from working out and took a shower and stuff. I probably should have
Oh,
gone and grabbed an espresso or something like that. But I'm
that
doing
is
all right. I'm fine. I got some water here. I'll be all right. I'll be all right. We
that's
can
the
talk some hoops, we can
exact
talk some sports. But yeah, we're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, that is the exact opposite of having an espresso, working out, having a shower. You're in that kind of comfy mood. You're like trying to get fire also on all cylinders again. So I'll just bring the energy for us,
I
and
like it.
maybe
You always do.
yeah. Thank you, Matt. That's so kind. But let's just jump right into things here. We of course are going to start like we always do with some weekly bullet points. Get it? Points in the podcast. How about that? So we're gonna do some off-season bullet points. Our just get caught up on what we missed since we last talked. Guess what, folks? It's not a whole lot of stuff. That makes sense, but there are a few interesting things, and we'll give some thoughts. So, first thing I just want to mention, you're going to start to see a bunch of training camp signings that will pop up. Training camp will start in early October, nearing the end of September. Over the next month or so, you're going to see a lot of Exhibit 10 contracts. Those are basically, I mean, we can get more into that as we get closer to training camp if you want a better description, but for lack of better terms, and also just keeping things brief, those are training camp contracts. Those are guys that are going to be come in, and NBA rosters can be expanded to, I believe 21 players is the exact number for the preseason time. And so there's some names out there this week that got some training camp deals. I'm not even going to go and mention those players right now because it's just not it's
not worth it.
Not a huge deal, not worth going through it. It's not anything that I feel like the listener needs to know, and we're here to give the need to know, and that stuff's not too important right now. But you're just going to see Woj, Shams, Chris Haynes, like these bigger names. They're gonna tweet something. Maybe your phone's gonna go off. You're gonna be like, oh my god, what happened? It's probably gonna be a pretty low stakes signing for training camp coming up. So just keep that stuff in mind over the next handful of days and weeks. As terms of full-time roster spot signing, the next piece of news was that Garrett Temple joined the Toronto Raptors
Bulls
on a
legend.
one-year
Garrett
deal.
Temple.
Yes, Matt and I, Chicago Bulls guys. Garrett Temple, of course, is a Bulls legend. One of those players that kind of came in around the same time as Thaddeus Young and Tomas Satoransky for the Chicago Bulls. And actually, I got nothing but love and respect for Garrett Temple.
I say that sarcastically, but like he was actually a pretty effective.
He was actually better
for those very bad Bulls teams. He was pretty effective.
In Chicago, he was actually more effective than people thought. It was not someone that they knew, but more importantly, he's still around kind of, and still getting a like a 1 year deal on the Raptors, even though he's 37 years old, because of the fact that he's just a well-respected off the court guy. He's been a huge part of the Players Association. He's kind of one of those, if you look at the surveys that a lot of, like The Athletic does and all these places do at the beginning of the year, and they ask players like, who can be a head coach? A current player that could be a head coach. Garrett Temple's always mentioned. Just a very well-respected guy. So he joins Toronto on a 1-year deal. Do I expect him to play much for them? Not really. If they need him on some nights, like they'll throw him out there. Like I said, a 3-and-D kind of guard / wing. But I'm good for Garrett Temple. I respect Garrett Temple. Happy that he continues to find a home.
And I guess there you lose a locker room type guy in Fred Van Vliet. Geez, I can't say that 5 times fast right now. You go out and maybe obviously not the same type of effectiveness on the court, but go and bring in a guy off the court who's good in the locker room, good with younger players, good with just about everybody, and everybody sees as a leader. So can't really replace what you lost in Van Vliet on the court with that signing, but you do replace maybe a little bit off it.
That's great point. I think especially with some of their younger guys that they're trying to build around, and especially changing coaches, their future in general has been kind of up in the air in over the past really 2 years because of a lot of trade rumors. So you want to get somebody in the locker room who's a pro, who can kind of settle things down, and also help a new coach on the court. If they do have to throw him out there, he's a veteran. He's going to know what to do. But yes, exactly a good point. Fred VanVleet leaves. He was probably that. He was exactly the kind of Temple character off the court. So smart, general smart move by them to just kind of finish up filling out their roster. Next point. Shams, this wasn't like huge breaking news necessarily, but we're digging through scraps right now.
We really are.
This is noteworthy, and that's why it's going to be in this. That's why we want to be sure to hit on it real quick. Shams mentioned earlier this week, or I guess I should say earlier last week over the weekend, that Miami is trying to create, 3 to 4 first round picks to be able to send over to Portland in the Damian Lillard trade. Whether or not those discussions have really gotten off the ground or continued is seemingly up in the air. I believe that ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski was, just in an ESPN hit on the network, was kind of talking about how those negotiations and talks haven't really progressed much. We know that Portland's holding out a bit to, they don't need to get something done right now. It's only August 2nd. They can wait till teams get more desperate. A team like Miami, especially, with them kind of holding off during the rest of the offseason with the expectation that they can go and get Damian Lillard, could get desperate and up the ante. But for me, the 3 to 4 first round picks thing, I don't even know if that's, that was expected to be thrown into a deal for someone like Damian Lillard. Mm-hmm. But I don't think their picks are all that valuable to really anybody around the league, because in my opinion, few franchises have been better at maintaining a level of competitiveness than Miami. So their picks are always outside the lottery. They're always usually in the 20s. We saw right after, Dwayne Wade, that era whole wrapped up. They had a little bit of a down, 2 down years or so, but then they got right back to it with Jimmy Butler. And they're a market that players love to go to. So this idea for a team like Portland, who wants to get a good return on investment for Dame, I'm not sure 3 for 4 of Miami's own first round picks are going to entice them very much. And that's why there's always been this idea of a third team needing to get involved, because they need to add better draft capital to entice Portland, and also add better young players than maybe someone like Tyler Hero, who Portland says, we got a young wing in Shaedon Sharpe, who's a score first guy. And we got, Scoot Henderson, who's a score first guy. We don't want Hero taking away the ball from those two guys. So I don't know. I just think that the idea I just think it's interesting, the 3 to 4 first round picks thing. You can say that, but Portland, I don't know if that's going to really make them budge all that much.
I kind of with you there too. Like the NBA, like we talked about, both pod, 3 now we've done, like those first round picks aren't really as valuable depending on who you're getting them from. And like you said, the Heat are always one of those teams that, like, at worst, they're finishing middle of the league. They're never a team that's hovering around, the top odds in the lottery. And if you send them Damian Lillard, okay, cool. That makes them instantly a top 2 team in the Eastern Conference. Then they're really not hovering around the lottery. Those are kind of becoming more like, almost second round picks with how far back they're getting. Like you said, I think it's going to have to be a third round team, because Portland's in no real rush here. Like, the asset isn't really depreciating in Damian Lillard. If he wants to hold out, great. That's even less wear and tear on his body for the first couple months of the year. And then we talked about last show how Miami is a team that has lost some pieces and is kind of banking on Damian Lillard being there. Well, great. If they are keeping that spot open to start the year, even this drags out into the regular season, they lost some pieces like Gabe Vincent and then Max Strus as well, and they struggle out of the gate next year. All right, then they get even more desperate to go out and get Damian Lillard. And I think Portland kind of tells them, no, you need to go out and we'll just hang on to this, go get a third team so we can get a better first round pick, or at least a higher one. Like, Portland kind of has, Portland has more leverage in this than I think I initially gave them credit for, because I think Miami is going to find themselves in pretty desperate need for Damian Lillard pretty quickly to start the year if they don't get him by opening night.
Right, and we saw with Kevin Durant just last season. What did they do? They waited out. The Nets weren't going to budge, and Durant ends up playing again for them until the deal comes to fruition later. So, I don't think that's going to happen with Dame. I think if anything, he might just sit out and wait for a trade to happen. And I don't know if Portland would even really want. I mean, I guess it's Dame, so they would gladly, I guess, accept him back on the court. But if the idea is still, we're going to trade you down the road, I wouldn't be shocked if this stretches into the season and he's sitting out until a deal is done, especially so they can begin this kind of new era around Scoot Anderson and around their young guys. It's going to continue to be interesting to watch. I find it way more fascinating, obviously, than the James Harden situation, not only because Lillard is a lot better, but just because the return for Lillard is going to be better, just because Portland in general, I find to be more interesting with their young talent than Philly. We talked about Philly a little bit on the last show, or maybe it was 2 shows ago. They're interesting because Embiid, they need to keep him happy, but I'm very interested to keep following the Lillard situation. I'm bored of it, but also just fascinated on how it will end. So that's the thing. I don't want any more news of I don't really care anymore about what Lillard thinks. I don't really care anymore about his connections with Miami. I just care more about seeing how the actual deal gets done. The rumors have been boring, but once the deal is actually finalized, it'll be fascinating to see what they get in return and where Lillard ends up. And if a third team gets involved, there could be a lot of moving pieces before the season begins. Lastly, for our weekly bullet points, the NBA Finals broadcast crew is going to get a pretty drastic shakeup. ESPN, with their layoffs, obviously let Jeff Van Gundy walk. Well, I guess not walk. They fired him.
They let him go.
He didn't have a choice.
They told him to walk.
Yeah, they told him to walk. They showed him out the door. Jeff Van Gundy, obviously, fan favorite, one of the best broadcasters, I think, out there, one of the best analysts out there. Few people can digest a live game better than him. He's, a former coach who has done nothing but succeed in the broadcast role. So the fact that they even let him go, I found shocking. I understand that they're trying to save dollars, but he was somebody that every time there was a game on, it made it more interesting. I'm sure some people got it. Some people will mute broadcasts and listen to game. That's you never were muting Jeff Van Gundy. So that's a guy that I think they made a huge mistake letting him walk, but because they did that, they were obviously going to have to shake up their number one crew on ESPN with Mike Breen, him, and Mark Jackson. So initial reports were saying that Doris Burke would be promoted to join Breen and Mark Jackson. Instead, it turns out Mark Jackson was booted as well. I think that one was more
the delayed firing.
Yeah, it was a delayed firing. That one does seem a little bit more like they gave him the option of. I think it was reported by the New York Post that he had the option to, maybe go to a B team. My dog giving a nice little shake. He had the option to go to a B team or walk, and he chose to walk. So, another former coach, maybe he returns to coaching or something, and obviously a former great player. So I'd be curious to see if he returns to coaching or goes and looks for another broadcast position. Same with Jeff Van Gundy. But the ESPN Finals crew is going to be Breen, Doris Burke, and I think they were trying to get Doc Rivers, it said. So it's just going to sound a lot different. It's going to look a lot different, especially each of those people I kind of like individually. I respect Doris Burke. Doc Rivers has been good when he's done this type of stuff in the past. And Mike Breen obviously is an American treasure. So I think the three would be fine together, but it's just going to be a different taste. It's going to be weird for some NBA fans who've grown used to the trio of Van Gundy and Breen and Jackson.
Yeah, I always thought Breen was fine, and then Van Gundy was fine as well. I never really thought Mark Jackson was anything special as a commentator, and if anything, I kind of just want to hear Doc's hoarse voice. I know usually that voice is because he's in press conferences after screaming for 4 quarters at his team, but I really want to hear that on a broadcast. I'm excited for it, and I love Doris Burke. I think she's fantastic at what she does, so I think that will be I don't know. I'm fine with the changeup. I thought that crew was fine, but Mike Breen, like you said, he's the real treasure, and as long as he's sticking around, that's really the only thing I'm truly too passionate about.
Right, he'll be there, and for me, it's just the Van Gundy thing is still so frustrating. I don't know why they made that decision.
He'll probably end up with TNT, right? I mean,
give me Stan and Jeff.
Stan and Jeff on the same broadcast.
Yeah, I want the two brothers.
Marv Albert.
Yeah, give me them on a broadcast, and then give me a reality TV show behind the scenes of those two, just getting ready for the broadcast.
That would be an epic HBO or ESPN, I guess would be ESPN documentary, and like NBA TV like documentary to follow to have those two were on the same broadcast crew for TNT, just to follow them for like a 2-week stretch. That would be.
How we have Hard Knocks?
Hard Knocks with the Van Gundy brothers. That follow them around for doesn't even have to be a full season, a month. just a month's worth of games, go to the hotel with them, go to restaurants with them, go with them to, talk to players and teams and production meetings. I would just absolutely drink that content in.
Well, I think it's onto something, and maybe Points on the Podcast needs to look into this. But I think that
we have a film crew. Think we have a budget for that?
Yeah, maybe if we get BetSperts on, get a film crew going. I just think that you're putting something in my brain here because it's interesting how popular we've seen the Hard Knocks style things become with the quarterback show on Netflix, and then all the other sports. Obviously, it kind of started with the F1 show, and then they have the tennis one, Breakpoint. They've had Full Swing with golf. So taking a step into the following some of the broadcasters would be very fascinating because they do have a very hectic, busy life. And I actually, and from somebody who's just, we work in the sports media industry, I would be interested in seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff for those people, but especially with personalities like Jeff Van Gundy and Stan Van Gundy.
Yeah.
I would, the Van Gundy brothers. That could also just be a show on E. Give me that. I would watch it.
Following the Kardashians, you get the Van Gundys. But they're not on E anymore. I should know that.
It's fine. It's okay. We'll let it slide. Okay, so that's your weekly bullet points. I think we should move on. I want to kind of circle Damian Lillard.
Oh, this is interesting. We're back and still recording. Eli, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I think my computer must have also had some of the espresso and decided to, overdo everything. I mean, I guess I had a good amount of tabs open. I don't think that really.
Hey, it's anyone who's done any sort of live streaming has had that exact same thing happen to them before. It happens to the best of us. It's happened to me. It's happened to you. It's going to happen to me again at some point down the road here. It happens. We move on. We get back to talking hoops.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, what we were about to, at least it happened kind of organically at a point that made sense.
It's a nice segment.
Segmented point. Exactly. So in the edit, this is going to be a lot easier.
Video, not as much. We'll just leave that in there for those people watching on YouTube. Sorry about that.
You could just fast forward. Well, this doesn't help now. Go back and tell past you to just fast forward.
Fast forward like 5 minutes. It's fine.
Yeah, you can see on the little toggle, right? You can like hang over and you can see when someone pops back up. So anyway, what we were going to talk about before my computer decided to give me the middle finger was the Damian Lillard situation a little bit more extensively, only because we did get some news. It was actually only moments really after we ended up recording last week.
As always seems to happen.
Yes.
Any show ever.
Always common. The Athletic, Shams Charania. Well, actually, it wasn't The Athletic. It was just Shams. I believe it was on his Bali Sports show or what have you. I always try to make sure I credit the right sources. A lot of these people, especially him, he works for a lot of different places. So whenever he announces news, it's like,
it's probably on Stadium.
Yeah, I believe it was on Stadium. You always want to attribute it to the right places. So anyway, he announced that the NBA, and you probably have heard this by now, but the NBA reached out to Lillard and his agent, Aaron Goodwin, to kind of investigate their handling of his trade demand in recent weeks. It kind of ended up informing them that, and this was a little bit foggy the way everything was reported at first, that they need to be more direct about, or they can't be so direct about saying, we only want to go to Miami and we won't play for anybody else. If you trade for me, we won't abide by the contract rules and everything. The NBA said that's a big no-no. And so the issue wasn't necessarily, hey, you can't tell Portland that you want to go to Miami. That is something that he's allowed to do. It's in his right to demand a trade and to ask to go to a specific place. But what he and his agent can't do is send the message out to other people and say, if anyone but this place trades for me, I will not,
His agent can't call the Knicks and say, don't you dare make an offer because he's not going to play for you.
Exactly. And this has been done in the past by other people. I have very little question. It's done all the time behind the scenes. And this is just an example of,
they made it way too public.
Right.
Way too public.
Well, that, and also the NBA does want to put a stop to that kind of, environment and that kind of behind the scenes thing. So they saw this, because of how public it was, it's like the tampering stuff. When things are very obvious, then they try to make an example of it to slow it down behind the scenes. So the tampering it happens all the time. Everybody knows it, but every year they make an example out of somebody by taking away a second round pick. They did it to the Bulls and Lonzo Ball a couple of years ago. They did it to the Bucks. They did it to the 76ers, I believe. With
what can they do to Lillard though? Like, what, can you suspend him?
Well, so I have the memo pulled up here.
Technically, it's his agent, right? Like, he's not the one making these phone calls. It's technically his agent. Yeah, technically his agent is the one making the phone calls. However, Lillard can also get in trouble and might also be telling people behind the scenes, because I believe Lillard is involved in some extent in conversations. But the memo specifically says that I'm going to read it. I'll just read like half of it here, because I do think the memo itself at least does a good job of specifically stating, what the problems are. Because initially people were like, yeah, finally they're cracking down on trade demands and trade requests. That's not the problem. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that players have a right to do that. So they say we interviewed Goodwin and Lillard and also spoke with several NBA teams to whom Goodwin spoke. Goodwin denied stating or indicating to any team that Lillard would refuse to play for them. Goodwin and Lillard affirmed to us that Lillard would fully perform the services called for under his player contract in any trade scenario. The relevant teams provided descriptions of their communications, and Goodwin that were mostly, though not entirely, consistent with Goodwin's statements. So we have advised Goodwin and Lillard that any future comments made privately to teams or publicly suggesting that Lillard will not fully perform the services called for under his player contract in the event of a trade will subject Lillard to discipline by the NBA. Then they say that they've also advised the Player Association of this issue and things like that. So again, the specifics here are saying that Lillard and Goodwin cannot make comments privately or publicly suggesting that Lillard will not perform the services that his contract specifically state with any NBA team. He can't refuse, like you said, can't call the Knicks and say, I'm not going to play for you because I only want to go to Miami. That's if the Knicks end up trading for you, and that's what Portland does because it's in their power to, then, sucks to suck. That's what ends up happening. And you can't just sit out. So, or threaten to sit out, and that's why they don't trade for you. So, it's not necessarily shocking, but this is the first time we've seen the NBA kind of, really enter the mix here and threaten this. And like you said, what can they do to Lillard? It's unclear. They're not going to specifically state what the level of discipline would be, but my guess is, the suspension of some kind. But then if he's already not playing, refusing to play, then I don't know. Maybe at least he's not making money that way. If they suspend him without pay. So I think this is just more of a scare tactic. It's not any situation where clearly it's not going to actually lead to anything. My guess is still he probably ends up in Miami in some way, but it's just done in a manner that's a little bit more in line with what the NBA would want. But this was a very weird thing to surface because we've just never seen the NBA have to really send out a memo and a warning. And this was sent to all 30 NBA teams saying, hey, this has got to stop. And so I think it also, like I said at the beginning, it speaks to the fact that this has probably happened many times behind the scenes. We've seen a lot of high profile traffic over the past couple of years with Durant moving and with Kyrie moving and James Harden moving and, all these players trading places. My guess is that this type of stuff has happened. Durant, that was kind of the thing with Durant too. He was only going to want to play in Phoenix. There was other teams, of course, that wanted to trade for Kevin Durant. All 30 teams probably ended up calling Brooklyn about it. But he was like, I'm only going to play for, I only want to play for Phoenix.
Yeah, I want to play here.
And while, again, that's in his right, if he wants to say that, that's fine. It wouldn't shock me if there was stuff behind the scenes with his, agency and him saying, like, I'm not going to play anywhere else if they trade for me and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to, abide by my contract in any other city. So it's just it's interesting. It kind of tells me that this has just been an issue that they've wanted to kind of slap on the wrist, and they saw this as an avenue to do just that.
But yeah, it's been going on for a long time, especially in this new era of superstars forcing trades to where they want to go. But Lillard and his agent just got kind of, too sloppy with it, or maybe just too forward with it, however you want to phrase it. They got too obvious with it and they were too public about it. And the NBA is like, guys, we can't really be doing that. We need to calm down a little bit. Like, players still hold all the power. They're still going where they want to go. Let's not be obnoxious about it. So I'm fine with it. It's not like they can do a ton, but I feel like they're doing whatever it is they can, which is, like you said, a slap on the wrist.
Well, I think they want to, and they want to remind players. It's like, we've given you a lot of power. You definitely have a lot of power, but let's also remember that we're here and there's two sides to this, to these trade requests in a lot of ways. And I think I've always been very pro player. I've always leaned definitely more in their direction, and for them to have the ability. I also think the player movement is generally pretty good for the league. I understand that loyalty is a big thing to have in on a more regional level, to have stars stay in a place. I want that to happen for smaller markets and things like that. I'm glad that Giannis has, he's stayed with Milwaukee and I mean, well, Steph is not a small market, but Steph stays where he's stayed. Luka, hopefully he'll stay in Dallas, and I do think it's good to have that star power there. But at the same time, the player movement is part of why the NBA has only continued to kind of blossom and blow up in a lot of ways, because you never know what's going to happen. It's way more exciting. We talked about this a couple shows ago. The news cycle has, become way more of a year-round thing. It's not the NFL yet in terms of that, but it's a lot closer. The offseason's way more of a storyline, and it's because of all this player movement. So I've always been very pro that, but at the same time, there needs to be some sort of cutoff, some sort of line where you can't give them all the power. And I don't want to see Portland get completely screwed over by Dame just getting to go to Miami and they have to take a package of some crappy picks and Tyler Hero. That's not what I want to see for a team in Portland who has a fun young foundation and can potentially get great assets back for a great player in Lillard. That should be the trade-off. You trade a great player, you get great assets, and that team can continue to build properly. So it'd be the same thing. Any fan, I think, would want that for their organization. If a great player's leaving and they have to trade that great player,
let's get something for them.
You need to get great assets in return. It needs to be a fair trade-off of some kind. So, yeah, I just think that's kind of what the NBA is trying to remind people here is this has got to be as close to a fair trade-off as possible. If you want to go somewhere, fine. But you can't just completely leave the organization out to dry.
I mean, ultimately, the commissioner does work for the owners of the NBA franchises, and I'm sure a bunch of them were probably getting to the point where they thought this was getting a little bit out of hand. Obviously, it's a league where the players have most of the power, but when it gets to the point where owners are just getting screwed over on these deals because they have no leverage, that's probably where it gets to a point of a problem. Because, like you said, then they're getting screwed on these deals. Not only do they have to part with a big name player, but then they don't even get close to fair value back for it. And it's probably just a step in ensuring that we're actually getting balanced, fair trades when it comes to trading star talent.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just think the more and more it's something that needs to be, I think, a constant reminder because the star players asking to be traded isn't really going to change anytime
soon.
No,
that's never going to change.
And
that's fine. Doesn't have to.
Right.
Let's keep it fair.
Yeah. All right. That's all I wanted to say on that. I just think it was a bigger deal. It was a big deal because it was kind of weird too. Like everyone first thought they were, like I said, with cracking down on the actual trade demand, which that's not the case. It's on more of the way that it's being handled. But it's still a big deal. So I don't know. It was just kind of a weird offseason storyline. And since there's nothing else to talk about, people kind of hyper focused a little bit on the wrong things, but whatever. Okay. Moving on, the last thing that I kind of want to touch on here, I was interested as we were talking about these prove it teams. A lot of these teams were, for the most part, either finals contenders or playoff caliber contenders, teams that had to prove that they could be that to justify either the rosters they built, the investments they made in players, the future trajectory that they want to be on. So as we talked about those last two episodes, if people want to go back, we gave our Eastern Conference prove it teams and our Western Conference prove it teams. So we left out a chunk of those bottom feeders in each conference, right? And they're bottom feeders for a reason. They don't have like a lot of proof to this upcoming year. They might not be the most exciting storylines to follow, but at the same time, they're rebuilding a lot of these organizations. Some of them are in an exciting place, and eventually on one of the shows coming up, I think it'll be fun to kind of just talk about all of those rebuilding teams with young talent and kind of discuss what their ceilings are in each conference. The Spurs with Wemby and Detroit with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. But today, before we kind of talk about an all-encompassing thing about those teams, I would rather focus just on two, because there's two that every time I look at the standings, I'm kind of interested in. And those two teams are the Magic and the Pacers in the Eastern Conference. I am very interested in this upcoming year, specifically for both these teams, just because while they're a little bit, and we'll get into it, are kind of on different paths. They're also, both missed the playoffs last year. They're not in the stage of we're going to just be vying for a top pick in this upcoming draft. Also, a lot of bottom feeders in general throughout the NBA probably are going to try to take a step forward this year just because the upcoming draft isn't all that enticing. It doesn't have the kind of star power that we've seen the past couple of years. But these two teams specifically are those teams that you look at and go, if they're in the play-in tournament this year, if they're trying to get into a first-round series, I'm not going to be shocked by the end of the year necessarily. So I'm kind of wondering who's better suited to do that. If you look at the current win totals for both these teams, they're basically around the same spot. DraftKings currently has the Indiana Pacers at 37.5 wins and the Orlando Magic at 36.5 wins. So they're expected to be kind of butting heads all season long. They were for part of this year. But I want to kind of first look at what both teams did. And at the end, the goal here is just kind of to decide who probably has the higher likelihood of taking a leap this year and surprising people with a potential playoff appearance or at least a play-in appearance. If they both do that, maybe it would probably be a little bit shocking just because we said they're going to be butting heads in the conference.
East, yeah.
And my guess is one of these teams is able to get over the hump, and I think they're also have a higher likelihood than Detroit and Charlotte. It's like these two teams are better suited to take that next step. Indiana, I think what we should really remember is that last season, a lot of people forget, they were above 500 heading into 2022. So heading into January 1st, this team was 20-17. Tyrese Halliburton played 40 of their 42 games up until that point, and he was the primary reason for their success. It was kind of one of those things where he was immediately making the trade for the swap of De'Aaron or Domantas Sabonis for Halliburton. It was looking like a win-win situation for both teams. It still does to this point, but he was really shocking a lot of people by having Indiana as above a 500 team heading into January. And then, of course, he got hurt. He got injured. He ends up only playing 16 more games throughout the rest of the season, and Indiana falls out of the play-in tournament picture and end up where they are. But with that being the case, picturing a full year of a healthy Tyrese Halliburton, I don't think it's crazy necessarily to think that this team can hover far closer to the 500 mark, that they were above it when he was healthy. Why can't they be right around it if he's healthy for an entire season? I still don't think, this means that they're going to greatly exceed the 500, but if they're right around that, I don't necessarily think I'd be surprised. And I think this is especially true when we consider the players that they were able to add this offseason. Bruce Brown comes over from the Denver Nuggets. They gave him an absolutely incredible amount of money to come there on just a 2-year deal. However, in the 2-year deal, I believe, well, actually, I don't know if it's, Matt, maybe you could check right now if it's a team option or a player option for the second year. Part of me thinks it's actually going to be a team option.
I'm taking a look. You talk, I'll look at that.
Yeah, but the Bruce Brown contract, you can pull up the logistics. We did talk about
club option for
okay
2024-25
team option,
and probably a 1-year deal.
Right. Well, I mean, the deal is how much is they could probably try to negotiate an extension of sorts, but what he's making like 40 something million over 2 years.
It's right? 2 years, 45,
right? So an incredible amount of money for somebody who obviously isn't a star caliber player, but he proved with the Denver Nuggets to be a very high functioning role player and somebody who I think fits pretty excellently alongside Tyrese Halliburton. He's a high motor guy. He's a bigger guard. We've seen him be able to also play small ball and kind of play reverse pick and roll. You'd think he'd be the one running pick and roll. He'd be setting screens, acting as a roll man. He's very athletic. He adds kind of that dirty work mentality to this Pacers team and just veteran experience, championship experience. Defensively, too, for a team that struggled defensively last year. He may not, Brown isn't necessarily the most gifted defender. However, he's switchable. He's going to help improve that side of the ball. To me, overall, they're just kind of have built this high energy, athletic, in your face, tough guy reputation over these past 2 years with Benedict Mathurin, with Halliburton. He's a very fearless player. Like I said, Brown, he's physical. He's that high motor role player. Miles Turner, physical shot blocker down low. And then they end up targeting Obi Toppin. This past offseason, they acquire him from the New York Knicks. An extremely athletic, long, versatile, power forward wing that he hasn't yet really figured it out in the NBA, I would say, but also the Knicks didn't kind of let him run wild. With this,
it seemed like a guy that Tibbs kind of gave up on early and just kind of wrote off as not a Tibbs guy, which he'll tend to do with younger players.
Right. And this, yeah. So he makes far more sense on this kind of this young, like I said, in your face, gritty, if you will, Pacer team. And also, all things considered, they shot 11th in three-point percentage last season. They chucked up the 7th most three-point attempts. They have guys like Nimhard, Buddy Hield, Halliburton's an above-average three-point shooter. They traded for Jordan Nora midway through last season from the Milwaukee Bucks. He's an above-average three-point shooter. So basically, when I look across this Pacers roster, while they didn't make a ton of changes, adding a guy like Bruce Brown, adding someone like Obi Toppin, not only do I think they really kind of solidified what they want their identity to be with these two, but and Obi Toppin may be young. I mean, he was an older rookie or like a way older rookie than expected. However, he does add some of that veteran experience. They add some vets, and if they're able to float around that above 500 with a healthy Halliburton, and then you add these guys into the mix, it's going to be really, I think they're an exciting group to watch. They're young. The identity, like I said, is coming together. Defensively, they'll be kind of interesting to watch, but I do think they added some switchability with their guys they added. And then offensively, it's an offense that can do a little bit of everything. They can run in transition. They were 4th in assist percentage last season. They were the 4th most efficient team in transition. They have shooters they can spray it out to. It's just an exciting young roster. And I think out of most, they're kind of a forgotten. Indiana in general can be forgotten. The Pacers can be forgotten. But when you look at a lot of these younger rosters in the NBA, they make a lot of sense as a team that can really begin to impress and really begin to kind of carve themselves out a path towards consistent competitiveness, especially in Eastern Conference, where some teams are in a really fragile place and some teams are, relying on a veteran core of sorts that could fall through in the coming years. If I had to give them issues, I think Indiana's main issues revolve around rebounding. They revolve around some turnover issues that they've had last year. They still don't have, like Miles Turner is a great center. He's a great defensive big man, but he isn't necessarily the most gifted rebounder. And hopefully adding Bruce Brown, Toppin, those are players who will rebound at their position. But that'll be interesting to see how that stuff goes. But it's a team that, for the most part, I think is deserves to be looked at a little bit more as we enter this upcoming season as a team that might be able to surprise.
I mean, I guess I'll go on that on the other side there, and I'll make the Orlando argument. Tyrese Halliburton, I think, is obviously the main cog there for Indiana, and he's their best player. And granted, now a deeper team after these offseason moves, but in 3 NBA seasons now, I think he's played less than 60 games in 2 out of those. So is he going to be able to stay healthy? Can they survive if he's gone for significant amounts of time? Not really sure. Also, as good as Indiana as much as they probably improved this offseason, I mean, Milwaukee is going to be Milwaukee. They're a very good basketball team. Detroit is going to be bad, but they're going to be frisky. They got better. They're a much better coach team now than they used to be. Cleveland, I think, got better this offseason. They're going to be a good team. And I mean, who knows what the Bulls are going to be, but like those Bulls and Pacers, the Bulls are not an easy out, I guess I should say. So that division is really deep, and a lot of those opponents are going to create tough matchups for them night in and night out. And then you look at who the Magic are playing on a nightly basis in that division. Miami, obviously the class of it, going to the NBA Finals last year, but like we talked about, like they don't have Lillard yet. That team did lose some pieces this offseason, so they're not quite as deep as they were last year. And then you look at the other 5, like Charlotte, we were just talking about, not really ready to take that jump that we're talking about. Orlando and Indiana. Atlanta, we have no idea about, and what's even going to happen there with Trae Young. Is he going to? That's been a big question mark for the last couple of years. Washington is running out a big 2 of Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole, which I'm not totally sure how that's going to all work out. So I think when you look at the teams they're going to be playing on a regular basis inside their own divisions, I think Orlando probably has the significant advantage there. And I think while they might have not made any big, huge, flashy offseason moves, thought they had a nice draft getting Anthony Black and Jett Howard. Joe Ingles is a nice veteran who can shoot for 40% from 3 coming off the bench. And they have a young starting lineup that played pretty frisky at times last year. I know they lost 4 in a row to close out the year last year, but before that, I think they had won I think it was 6 out of 7 or something. They were playing some really good basketball. So that's just a young core that, while there might not be the one star yet, obviously Ben Caro's the number 1 overall pick from last year. He might be the most poised to take that next jump. But that's a young, gritty starting lineup that plays really, really well together in a division that's not all that good. And I know divisions don't mean the world, but that is the team that are the teams you're playing the most on your schedule. So I think in terms of that standpoint, I probably lean towards Orlando, but also if we're sitting here in however many months from now and Indiana's in the play-in tournament, I'm not going to be surprised by it.
Well, I think, yeah, and I'm not even sitting here to argue with you necessarily.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you made the Indiana argument, so
no,
I
I
just grabbed the
appreciate you
Orlando
doing
one.
it.
Yeah.
And something I didn't even have, written down and in the back of my head was, that idea of who they're playing in the division.
Yeah.
It might, it doesn't, a lot of people don't think about it too much. It might not matter a ton, but those are 16 games, out of your schedule. And there's no question that Indiana, those 16 games for them
Those
are
are
going
gonna
to
be
be
tough.
significantly harder batch of games than what you're going to see if you're the Orlando Magic. Like you said, Charlotte, Washington, Miami, and Atlanta. That's a way better or easier bunch than Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Detroit.
Yeah, and
Especially,
Orlando played Miami really tough last year. I think they lost. They were 1-3, but they had one win. Obviously, one loss came in overtime. Another one was by 5 points, and the other I think was the last game of the year. They got kind of blown out. But 3 of the 4 games they either won or played into really close games.
well, that was their and that was their thing. That was kind of their MO all of last year. I mean, Orlando even more so, I remember, than Indiana. Again, it might have been attributed to the Halliburton injury, but Orlando was playing teams close all the time. And it's not
Mhm.
like this was a team that was losing or was, winning only 10, 15 games. This wasn't a completely horrible team. This was a team that still won 34 games last year. And, a team that, like you said, was stringing together some win streaks here and there. I think that, you talk about the star power thing. I actually think when you look at these Indiana and Orlando, and why I think this is such an interesting discussion to have, and why these two teams in particular for this year are interesting to watch, I actually think the star power and potential on Orlando is significantly higher, because in Indiana, yeah, you have Halliburton who's there and he's your star piece and your number one. But after that, it looks like a bunch of just kind of higher end role players. We
Yeah.
kind of know what Miles Turner is at this point. You can make a case that Benedict Mathurin can continue to excel. He played well last year at times, and he is a great scorer. But I don't know. He projects a little bit more to be one of those, just bucket getter types, as opposed to somebody like Halliburton, who's kind of making everybody around him better and doing it on both ends of the floor. When you look at Orlando, you have Paolo Banchero, who, let's not forget what this guy did last year. He averaged 20 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and rookie of the year. Like this, again, this wasn't a 10-win team. This was a 34-win team
Mhm.
that for a while was actually in the mix for the play-in tournament. Banchero played 72 games. He was doing things that people hadn't seen technically since, LeBron's rookie year. And that isn't to make a direct comparison between those two by any means, but it's just to say he had a great first year. And there's a real chance that if he just continues to take a step this year, why can't he be an all-star candidate this year? Why
Yeah.
can't he be somebody like that? He's been incredibly hard for opposing teams to guard. And then Franz Wagner, let's not forget about him. While he may not be as high of a ceiling as somebody like Banchero, that's a guy who is extremely well respected already around the league. He took a jump and averaged 18.6 points last year. He shot 48.5% from the field. Extremely efficient player. The duo that those two have at the wing is extremely exciting and probably has a higher ceiling than any duo that you're going to see in Indiana. So that's the root for me of why it's fascinating to look specifically at these two kind of butting heads and deciding who might be able to take the lead. Because I think team wise, Indiana seems like the better team to me. They just seem like the more, and that's probably why they have at least one more win in the in the over under win totals. But they're the better all around team. Orlando was one of the least efficient ISO teams last year. They were one of the fifth worst offense. They added shooting, like you mentioned, with Jess Howard, Caleb Houston, Joe Ingles, but they're going to be relying on a lot on those kind of guys, and two of them
Mhm.
are still rookies to be able to really, up the offense. But what can surpass a team like Indiana being the more efficient team and the more well-rounded team is just somebody being a true star. And the chance of that happening in Orlando with someone like Paolo is higher than someone else doing it there. So, and like you said with the health, if Paolo played 72 games in his rookie year, like he was pretty durable.
Yeah.
If he can be on the floor, if he just takes another step and he's on the floor longer than Halliburton, like that can give Orlando a boost. So the main issue is still just the lack of shooting. the point guard play is a lot will probably hinge if you had to pick one thing for the Magic to really put them in contention with, to surpass, in my mind, Indiana to be the, team that makes the better jump this year. It probably starts with a guy like Anthony Black. He's only a rookie, but they really need more solid point guard play. And if he can kind of go in there, he looked really good during Summer League at times. He's a bigger guard, drawn some comparisons to Lonzo in a way, just because of the way that he can play in transition and his size and his ability to guard multiple positions there. If he can come in and kind of help distribute the wealth between Paolo and Franz and spray out to some shooters, he could kind of be the missing piece there. And that's clearly what they were hoping by drafting him in the top 10. But it's a lot to ask for from a rookie. I don't know if he's going to be able to reach that mark. But we'll see. It's going to be exciting. I like you said, it's not like one of these teams is going to be making a major run this year. But if you love the NBA and you also want to continue to look down the road near the future in the East, these are two teams that have extremely bright futures moving forward. And if we were power ranking, the bright future power rankings, there's a very real chance that these two are near the top in the top 5 for two of the brightest, paths down the road to be real threats in the East.
Not the Bulls? You don't think the Bulls are in there?
I do not think I don't think the Bulls are in there right now. Maybe they'll change my mind this year. Maybe we'll
probably not.
Yeah, I highly doubt it, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no on that one. All right. Well, I think that is a good place to stop for the week. Hopefully, it was a little more context on two East teams that could be fun to watch this year. And other than that, I think I'm gonna have another espresso. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna.
I might need to go get one.
Yeah, you might have to go do it. But I will. We'll wrap up, and I gotta go stretch my thumb. I gotta go stretch everything out before my next rec league game.
Yeah, let's not talk next week about how you got hurt again. Let's try and stay healthy this time around.
We're 2 for 2 on injuries, but we're gonna go back out there today. We get a week to heal each. So the week is good. I get some treatment.
It's like an NFL schedule.
Right. I'm gonna get a good treatment. Maybe I'll find a way to get maybe I'll hire a team doc for our rec league. I got to tell them to invest in that.
Might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. All right. That's all we got. We'll be back next week with hopefully some more entertaining,
some news.
More news. But otherwise, we'll think of something fun to talk about. All right. We'll see you.